Have you ever felt so betrayed that revenge became the only thing that made sense? This is what happens when a massive corporation makes one fatal mistake. They betrayed the wrong people. Imagine working somewhere for 10 years, 15 years. Some gave nearly 2 decades. You sacrificed everything. Family moments, holidays, all because you believed in the mission. Then one morning without warning they threw you away like it meant nothing. Hundreds of loyal employees were let go in a single day. Security walked them out with cardboard boxes. But here is what the executives never understood. When you dismiss the people who built the empire, they know exactly how to dismantle it. Watch how these former employees orchestrated a devastating corporate reckoning. No violence. No illegal actions. Just strategy and patience. Ice-cold patience. They gathered irrefutable evidence and brought a multi-billion-dollar company to its knees in a single day. This is the Phoenix Alliance. The most calculated revenge story in corporate history. Let's rewind to 2015. Back to a time when big tech still felt magical, and everyone believed the next app could change the world. A new company was climbing faster than anyone expected. Investors were obsessed. Employees were proud. Journalists called it the future. At the annual retreat, the CEO stood under theater lights and announced, "We're not just a company. We're a family." People actually believed him. Why wouldn't they? The perks were legendary. Stock options, profit sharing, weekend retreats, catered lunches. There was even a company choir that sang at events. And it worked. The company attracted some of the strongest talent in the industry. One of them was Sarah Martinez. She joined in 2013 as a software engineer and quickly became one of the most respected minds in the building. Sarah didn't just work hard. She lived for the job. Late nights, weekends. She even debugged code on her honeymoon. If the mission needed her, she showed up. She believed dedication would pay off. Then there was Marcus Chun. 15 years in the trenches. Started in sales, climbed to VP. He maintained a 98% client retention rate, which in that world is almost impossible. Marcus had 2 kids in college and a future carefully built around the company. He trusted it the way most people trust gravity. And finally David Kim. 18 years of service. Employee number 47. When he joined, there was no brand, no investors, just a handful of hopefuls in a rented office. David built systems that kept the entire operation running. When something broke, they didn't call IT. They called David. His retirement was 6 months away. After nearly 2 decades, he was finally close to enjoying everything he'd earned. These were only 3 people. But there were hundreds more just like them. They weren't employees. They were the foundation, the memory, the culture, the heart. They believed loyalty mattered. They believed the company would take care of them. They were about to learn it didn't. Through 2016 and 2017, the company kept climbing. Analysts said it was unstoppable. But in 2022, new investors arrived. Venture capital firms put in $200 million and wanted results immediately. Board meetings changed overnight. Cost cutting, automation, consultants. Every department was suddenly a spreadsheet. The CEO hesitated and tried to protect the people who built the place. That hesitation only delayed the inevitable. In 2023, consultants in sharp suits filled conference rooms and asked endless questions. They analyzed every role, every salary, every headcount. David had access to confidential files. One afternoon he opened a document that chilled him. Project Phoenix. Workforce optimization strategy. The plan was direct. Reduce headcount by 35 to 40%. Timeline. September 2025. Nearly 400 people marked for removal. The financial justification was $180 million in savings. The collateral damage would be everything else. September 15, 2025. 9 in the morning. 2,000 employees joined an emergency video call. The CEO, Michael Hastings, appeared. His expression was rigid and unreadable. Today I'm announcing Project Phoenix, a company-wide restructuring built around AI systems. Then came the part everyone feared. This includes a significant workforce reduction. The meeting ended. Inbox notifications exploded. Sarah got an email. Marcus got an email. David got an email. 387 employees in total. They had 30 minutes to process the news. Sarah walked to HR. A young staffer read from a script. Her position was eliminated. Employment terminated. 30 minutes to collect her belongings. 12 years reduced to a sentence. The paperwork was relentless. Non-disclosure agreements. Silence clauses. Instructions on what could not be discussed. Severance offered 24 weeks for 12 years of work. Stock options worth $500,000 were forfeited instantly. There was no negotiation. Sarah signed. Marcus signed. David signed. None of them had the leverage to fight it. The hallways looked like a scene no one prepared for. People hugging, crying, trying to make sense of what just happened. Sarah packed 12 years into a cardboard box. Security escorted her to the parking lot. She sat in her car and finally cried. Her phone lit up. 10 messages. 20. 50. Dozens of co-workers asking the same question. Were they alone? Had it happened to them too? Everyone felt the same shock. The same betrayal. Sarah wiped her eyes and typed a reply. No, I'm not okay. But we will be. And she meant it. That night no one slept. Phones buzzed. Group chats lit up. LinkedIn filled with quiet outrage. After 14 years here, 30 minutes of notice there. Hundreds of stories all telling the same thing. Shock followed by disbelief. The company said nothing. Their feet stayed still. A sterile corporate silence that somehow felt louder than the layoffs. Then Sarah got a notification. An encrypted message from David inviting her to a private group. Within 24 hours it grew to 150 members. By the end of day 2 it passed 300. A scattered workforce suddenly reunited by the same question. What really happened? First it looked like venting. People talked about sadness, anger, and the whiplash of losing work they cared about. But then someone asked what everyone else had been circling around. What if the decision was planned long before any justification was given? What if there was a paper trail? The chat froze for a moment. David admitted he had access to internal documents. Marcus mentioned emails where executives expressed doubts about the new AI systems. Sarah said code reviews showed failures ignored for months. The mood changed. Not rage for its own sake, but purpose. If there was a story here, it needed to be told accurately. David proposed a structure. Gather evidence, build a timeline, validate everything twice. Volunteers appeared immediately. People assigned themselves to tasks without waiting for permission. There was an intelligence group for digital files, an analysis group for patterns, and a documentation group to make it readable. It felt less like retaliation and more like journalism from the inside. A former lawyer named Rachel set boundaries. No hacking, no leaks that could break agreements, nothing unverifiable. If this held together, it needed to withstand scrutiny. The group agreed. They weren't saboteurs. They were witnesses. The work began. David combed through archives filled with a decade of memos and executive emails. Sarah reviewed AI modules tagged as known issues. Marcus dug up sales correspondence where the company promised features the engineers hadn't finished. Jennifer compared customer satisfaction numbers before and after the restructuring. The differences were dramatic. None of this proved wrongdoing by itself, but the pattern kept tightening. Internally, analysts warned the reductions could slow development and increase defects. Externally, investor summaries projected growth with no mention of risk. Rachel pointed out that misalignment between internal and external messaging was often where accountability started. After 3 weeks, the evidence binder filled with data points. 247 documented bugs. Dozens of instances where sales teams admitted privately they were overpromising. Customer feedback that contradicted investor presentations. A draft presentation labeled Project Phoenix Risk Assessment estimated product quality would drop significantly if the workforce reduction proceeded. It also predicted customer satisfaction would slump. Despite that, the conclusion said the financial savings justified moving ahead. No one in the group knew exactly what the endgame should be. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about transparency. If the public narrative said innovation drove the layoffs, the internal paperwork seemed to tell a different story. Someone in the chat suggested a name for the group. The Phoenix Alliance. A nod to the ashes metaphor without hostility attached. People liked it and kept working. They decided the next step wasn't a grand strike or some dramatic broadcast. It was patience. They needed the right moment when the facts would matter most. And that moment was coming. By March 2026, everything pointed toward a single moment. An insider sent a quiet message. The next-gen AI is falling apart. Crashes every day. But marketing is planning a massive launch in May. David straightened in his chair. What kind of launch? Full conference. CEO keynote. Press everywhere. They're calling it the next-gen AI suite. But the product isn't ready. The strategy team convened. Marcus analyzed the impact. If they launch half-finished AI, the media will be watching. Sarah agreed. And investors. And customers. This is the moment. David checked the calendar. May 15th. We have 8 weeks. 8 weeks to reveal the truth. Work intensified. Tom built a coordinated release plan. LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. Hit every platform at once. Hashtags formed. Hashtag Phoenix fails. Hashtag betrayed by tech. Marcus contacted journalists he trusted. TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. Publication windows aligned for May 15th. Rachel prepared whistleblower filings. This gives us legal protection. They can't shut us down. By late April, the machine was ready. The dossier, 487 pages. The documentary, 27 minutes. Media briefings, 23 outlets. May 14th, 24 hours until launch. Nobody slept. Sarah hovered over the upload button. Marcus queued the journalist packets. David reviewed the final timeline. He typed one message to the alliance. We turned betrayal into evidence. Tomorrow we show the world what really happened. The sun rose on May 15th. Judgment Day. May 15th, 2026. The day everything changed. The convention center was buzzing by 8 in the morning. Journalists, investors, analysts, and influencers packed into a massive exhibition hall waiting for the company's next-gen AI suite reveal. More than 2,000 attendees. Cameras everywhere. Reporters lining up for quotes. Everyone expecting a triumph. CEO Michael Hastings arrived with a practiced smile. The kind executives wear when they believe fortune is on their side. He shook hands, greeted investors, and waved at photographers, completely unaware that the countdown had already begun. At 8:30, the Phoenix Alliance ran final checks from a private group chat. Files confirmed, website stable, legal documents queued, and media partners positioned. 8 weeks of planning had built to a razor-thin moment. At 8:59, the lights dimmed and stage music rolled through the hall. Screens lit up with bold graphics and confident slogans. Intelligence amplified. The future of productivity. Beyond automation. 9 o'clock sharp. Hastings stepped onto the stage. Applause echoed across the room as livestream numbers climbed. The tech world was watching. Hastings began his keynote with a claim that the next-gen suite would change everything about the way people work. Back at their stations, the Alliance watched too. The trigger point was minutes away. At 9:05, David sent the message, "Execute." Sarah uploaded the documentary and dossier. Marcus released the media packages. The Alliance website went live across multiple platforms. Simultaneously. Quietly. Without fanfare. Just information hitting the world like a spark in dry grass. Within the first 2 minutes, the documentary began climbing. 5,000 views. 15,000. Comments flooded in. People shared clips. The platform's recommendation system latched onto the topic and pushed it further. Social timelines lit up fast. The hashtag began surfacing in the sidebar before anyone on stage had noticed. Journalists were always the first to spot movement, and they did. Notifications pinged. Phones buzzed across multiple rows in the hall. One reporter. Then 10. Then more. At 9:10, major outlets began publishing their investigations. Articles dropped in quick succession, each amplified by quotes, screenshots, and internal whistleblower accounts. Investors glanced at their phones, brows furrowing. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Cameras lowered as reporters read. On stage, Hastings continued, unaware that he was no longer the center of the story. At 9:12, the questions started. A journalist stood and asked Hastings to comment on the allegations being published at that very moment. Hastings hesitated, confused, then asked for clarification. An assistant rushed over and showed him her phone. His expression shifted. Controlled confidence cracked into uncertainty. More journalists rose from their seats. They asked about internal bugs, missed deadlines, misrepresented performance claims, and ignored whistleblowers. Questions weren't shouted. They were delivered like knives. Calm, precise, direct. At 9:15, Hastings left the stage without finishing the keynote. The live stream cut to a conference overlay screen. The presentation was abandoned. 5 minutes later, the stock market opened. The price dropped within seconds. 10%. Then 20. Then 30. Investors pulled back. Analysts updated their projections. The financial networks picked up the story and repeated it on loop. By the end of the day, the documentary had crossed 2 million views. The hashtag reached #1 trending worldwide. News programs invited former employees, analysts, and industry experts to comment. Each segment added more oxygen to the fire. The following morning, resignations began. Several executives disappeared from the company's leadership page without public explanation. Regulatory bodies requested documents. A federal inquiry was announced before noon. The company issued a short statement promising cooperation while evaluating the seriousness of recent claims. Across town, Sarah watched the coverage from her living room. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from sadness but from recognition that the truth had finally surfaced. Years of frustration and dismissal had turned into public accountability. David sat at his computer, eyes fixed on the numbers and headlines. He thought about the 18 years he had given to that company, the long nights, the loyalty, the betrayal, and now the reckoning. The Phoenix Alliance had done what no lawsuit, no memo, and no internal complaint ever managed to do. They didn't destroy anything with force. They didn't manipulate. They simply released the truth. And the truth carried more weight than revenge ever could. The empire fell because its foundation wasn't fraud-proof. It fell because the people it dismissed refused to stay silent. The next 48 hours were chaos. On May 16, the stock attempted to reopen after the failed keynote. It dropped another 20%. By the end of the morning, the company had shed more than $8 billion in value. Analysts stopped talking about recovery and started talking about survival. That afternoon, CEO Michael Hastings held an emergency press conference. He looked exhausted, pale, hands shaking as he tried to steady his notes. Cameras clicked in the silence before he spoke. "These allegations are completely false," he said, voice strained. Reporters didn't blink. Someone asked about a risk assessment that suggested leadership knew about internal failures months earlier. Hastings stammered his way through non-answers and deflections. It took only 12 minutes for him to give up and walk off stage. The damage had been done long before he reached the exit. By noon, major clients began terminating contracts. The wording was cold and direct. Effective immediately. Material breach. Loss of confidence. Within 3 days, more than 40% of the company's customer base vanished. $200 million in annual revenue evaporated. Then the resignations started. May 18th, the CFO. May 19th, the COO. May 20th, 3 members of the board. Corporate stability had entered free fall. On May 22nd, federal agents executed search warrants at headquarters. Employees watched from sidewalks as evidence carts rolled out the front doors. Hours later, the SEC announced formal charges related to misleading investors. Law firms filed class actions on behalf of shareholders and terminated staff. 12 separate lawsuits landed in 10 days. The company tried to counterattack with claims of NDA violations. Their legal strategy lasted less than a week. A federal judge dismissed the motion, ruling that confidentiality agreements don't shield companies from potential criminal exposure. Another door slammed shut. While the company wilted, the Phoenix Alliance rose. TechCrunch interviewed Sarah in a downtown studio. She spoke calmly about loyalty, silence, and the price of being ignored. "We gave them everything," she said. "They threw us away. But we proved workers have power too." The clip went viral. 3 million views in 24 hours. David wrote an op-ed for Wired. "I gave them 18 years. They gave me 30 minutes. Loyalty betrayed becomes your greatest weapon." Readers shared the article more than 100,000 times. For once, former employees weren't cautionary tales. They were protagonists. By June 1st, another 500 employees were laid off. The stock continued its descent from $120 to $35. A 70% collapse in less than 6 weeks. June 5th, Hastings resigned. No farewell letter. No speech. No internal video message trying to explain the unexplainable. The company survived on paper, but nobody mistook that for victory. The empire was gone. What remained was a wounded structure kept upright by lawyers and inertia. The alliance watched the unraveling quietly from their separate corners of the world. Years of humiliation condensed into a single moment of vindication. David typed one final message to the group chat. "We did it. They thought we were powerless. We proved them wrong. They had started as casualties. They ended as architects of accountability. And for once in this industry, the ending belonged to the workers." 6 months later, November 2026, the world looked very different. The company still existed, but barely. A shadow of its former self. Its stock had stabilized at $18 per share, down 85%. The legal consequences were severe. The SEC fined $250 million. Criminal charges were filed against Hastings, securities fraud, wire fraud, facing up to 20 years in prison. 3 other executives faced similar charges, all facing ruin. Class action lawsuits were settled, with $180 million paid to fired employees. Sarah received $340,000. Marcus got $425,000. David received $510,000. Not just compensation, justice. The impact went far beyond one company. The case became legendary. Business schools added it to their curriculum. Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, with the case study titled, "When Corporate Betrayal Leads to Destruction." Professors highlighted one key lesson. Loyalty is two-way, and companies that forget this do so at their peril. The case sparked legislative action. New laws were proposed. The AI Accountability Act, the Worker Protection Enhancement Act. Real change. Real reform. Tech companies took notice, canceling planned layoffs, terrified of becoming the next Phoenix case. A new movement emerged. Ethical tech companies pledged to prioritize people over profits. Investment funds focused on employee treatment, raising $500 million in the first month. Grassroots organizations formed, the Tech Workers Alliance, the Whistleblower Support Network, all inspired by the Phoenix Alliance. Sarah started a consulting company, Truth Tech Consulting, teaching companies to value employees. First-year revenue, $2 million. Marcus became a sought-after speaker. His TED Talk went viral with 8 million views. David finally enjoyed retirement, taking that long-awaited cruise with his wife. But he stayed connected, mentoring younger workers and advising on whistleblower cases. He wrote a book, Rising from the Ashes, which became a bestseller, inspiring millions. It shows that you can fight back. You can organize. You can expose the truth. And you can win. Loyalty is a two-way street. Companies need to remember that. Because loyalty, when weaponized, is the most powerful force in the world. This is the Phoenix Alliance. This is what happens when workers unite. This is the greatest revenge story ever told. Never forget that.